Welcome to Washington Post Sports Live. I'm Gene Wang, sitting today for Jonathan Forsythe. Fortunately, I have the benefit of the sage wisdom of the three gentlemen sitting to my left: Dan Steinberg, Scott Allen, Neil Greenberg. We have a lot to get to today. Big night in Washington sports. We have the Washington Nationals, who stayed alive for at least one more game. We have the Washington Redskins, who played a tight game against the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks, but still lost their third loss in a row. Now they've dug themselves a hole in the division race. Of course, the Washington Capitals open their season on Thursday. And then preseason basketball, the Wizards and Bulls get into a little skirmish. Is this a sign of things to come for a brewing rivalry? We'll get to that later. But first, on the top, it's the Washington Nationals forcing a Game 4 in San Francisco. It's going to be a game where if they win it, they come back for a Game 5. But we'll get to that later too. We saw at the end of the Game 3, Drew Storen came in. Their Nats are up 4-0. He puts 2 runners on base with no outs. Is he still the guy that you want to give the ball to if the situation rises again in Game 4? Scott, let's throw that to you.
I think yes. I think you do give him the ball despite the blown save in Game 2 and making things interesting in Game 3. I think he's still your best option, but I'd put a caveat on it, and that's if Pablo Sandoval comes up and has any chance to change the game, there is no way Matt Williams lets Drew Storen pitch to him. The splits for him, 199 against left-handed pitchers this year, over 300 against righties. I think you got to turn him around with Jerry Blevins or even Matt Thornton. Blevins has just been awesome against left-handers this year. I think you got to go matchups if Sandoval has a chance to change the game.
Sandoval 2 of 2 against Storen.
Right,
in
the last two
games.
So. Well, if you're Matt Williams, do you turn to Storen?
I mean, I think partially it's a question of who else would you have and what would the matchup be. I mean, I think that even a guy like Thornton, who wasn't even on the roster at the beginning of the season, is someone that, just as someone watching the game, I have kind of a tremendous amount of trust in. And Storen, you know, I think everyone, the first 2 runners on, and you see him cursing on the mound, you don't have a lot of faith in it, really, but I don't know. It depends. I guess it depends what the options are. Certainly, like, Soriano's not someone you want to go to. Clippard has been maybe one of the best eighth inning guys in the majors, and I don't know that you want to take him out of his comfort zone where he's been so dominant. And, you know, Storen was great down the stretch, so I don't really know what the options are, but, you know, he got 1 out in Game 2, and it was on a put out at the plate, and he gave up instantly guys on second and third yesterday. So, I mean, I think that you have to bring him in. He's the best option, but you just have to be very, very, very willing to make a move if things start going south.
Neil, how confident are you if Storen comes into the game in a tight situation?
I think a lot of it's just overreacting to some small sample sizes. I mean, 1/3 of an inning is not going to discount everything that he's done up to this point. He struck out over 7 batters per 9 innings. He has a strikeout to walk ratio of 4. I mean, that's the type of stuff that you want in a closer. Yeah, I think you go back to him for sure if you're in that situation.
I mean, I don't disagree with that, but the problem is that these
series
are decided.
Right, but you still can't discount. I mean, you can't say that what 1/3 of an inning is going to be what he's going to be going forward. I mean, either he's your closer and you go with him in the 9th, or you don't and you have to find something else. I mean, like Scott said, maybe there's some matchup situations that you bring someone else in, but for the most part, if he's your guy, you know, the closer has to know that he's your guy. That's why you put him in these pressure-packed situations. If there's any sort of doubt, that stuff can creep in. I think absolutely you go with him again.
I don't disagree with you there, but I would say if the Nats have a starter who's gone 8 2/3.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's automatic to put him in there, but you definitely want to. You know, he's got to be your guy. You need a guy, and he's probably the best of the bullpen right now.
Yeah, because the options are very limited, though, right? I mean, it's not like you have 3 guys who can close the game. I mean, if you want to use Clippard, maybe, but you're not going to go to Soriano, right? So it's kind of like there's no alternative.
Soriano pitched a nice inning.
Yeah, I was going to say, why not? I mean, he was warming up. I think that you can go to him in certain situations. I don't necessarily think that this has to be where you have to rely on one guy. I mean,
yeah.
You're in the playoffs, like Scott said. I mean, you need to win a game, and whatever pitcher, even if you lose 3 of them in the 9th inning to get that win, the Nats aren't in the luxury of waiting. They need a win, and they need the best pitcher out there,
yeah,
whoever that is.
If you're Matt Williams, you're not saving your bullpen for anything else at this point. I think he's doing this already, obviously, but you're looking at the splits, you're looking at the career matchups. If Craig Stammen has been dominant against Joe Panik, and I know they haven't. That's a small sample size if there ever was one.
Right.
But say Stammen's dominant against the guy coming in, I wouldn't hesitate to put him in for an out and then go to somebody else. Have an assembly line of relievers ready at this point.
Okay, Storen. But the bottom line is Storen got the job done. They live to play another day. They have the momentum. But my question to you all is, who still is in the better position? Who has the advantage? I mean, it's not like the Giants are facing elimination. They're still at home. They're still ahead in the series. The Nationals obviously, feel good about themselves. Which team's position would you rather be in, Neil? Start with you on that one.
Well, for this next game, I mean, being at home, you have to give the nod to the Giants slightly. I mean, I still think it's going to be a close series. But over the next couple games, I do think the Nationals have the pitching that they can pull it out. But, there is no tomorrow if they lose. So I would say I'd rather be in the position of the Giants right now.
And Scott, how about you?
Yeah, still would rather be up 2-1 as the Giants are at home with the chance to close it out. But the Game 3 win was just huge in that you got by their ace. You somehow got to Madison Bumgarner. It took an error to do it, but you got that win, and now you're facing Ryan Vogelsong, who scares nobody. And you're coming back with Gio and then Strauss and Zimmerman, or perhaps a combination in the next 2 games, possibly going back to Washington. So.
Vogelsong, though, was on the mound a couple years ago when they were facing elimination, pitched 5 strong innings. They went on to win that game. So, yeah, he's not Bumgarner, obviously, but I think they have confidence in him. But, Dan, we talked about momentum. But it's not like the Nats, all of a sudden, their bats came alive, right? It wasn't like what the Cardinals did to Kershaw. I mean, they got an error. It was kind of a fluke play, let's be honest about it.
They scored 2 runs.
Yeah.
I mean, 2 runs on a bunt from a guy who hadn't bunted since 2011. Right. And that's like what if you'd said, by far the best offensive play that the Nationals will have in Game 3 of the series comes on a Wilson Ramos bunt, you probably wouldn't feel very optimistic about it. And, then they got another run after that on a ground ball single from Cabrera. They got the big home run from Bryce Harper, which gave them a little bit of breathing room. But I think when we talk about the keys moving forward for the offense, they need Worth and LaRoche and Desmond in the middle of that lineup to be the 3, 4, and 5 hitters that they were all year. And they've kind of been a black hole in these 3 games. Obviously, it's only 3 games, but you can't. I mean, they're not gonna have long-term success if Worth and LaRoche and Desmond aren't doing anything in the middle of the lineup.
But I mean, psychologically, though, even they had scored 3 runs in 27 games. Doesn't it make a huge difference, no matter how they get them, that they got the runs on the board and they're thinking, okay, maybe we can build something off this? I mean, is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's probably fair. I think that probably gives them a little bit more. I mean, whatever people talk about pressure in a series, who knows? I sort of do buy the argument that the Giants are under a bit of pressure in this game because they don't want to get on a flight. Fly across the country and have to listen to, are they going to blow a 2-0 lead stories. They obviously don't want to do that. And they were even saying explicitly, we don't want to have to go back to Washington. No one here wants to get on that plane again. And so I think that if the Nats can get out to an early lead, I think probably there would be a little bit of pressure on the Giants.
But you're saying you'd still rather be in the Giants situation right now going into Game 4?
I think that if I had to pick a winner in Game 4, I would slightly favor the Nats. I think if I had to pick a winner in Game 5 based on the matchup, I would slightly favor the Nats. But for the series, I guess it still just seems more likely that the Giants will be able to pull out 1 game.
Do you favor the Nats?
For right now, I think I put it 50-50.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I really like the Nationals' chances in Game 4. And then coming back in the playoffs, home field advantage hasn't really been there for the Nationals in the playoffs. That's a small sample size as well, 2 years. But, I mean, we've seen them lose a Game 5 at home just 2 years ago, so that's kind of fresh in mind. But with those pitchers, as we talked about, with being able to go to Zimmerman and Strasburg, potentially, maybe both of them in Game 5, against Tim Hudson or Jake Peavy or whoever the Giants tried out there, I think in that case, I would favor the Nats by a little bit.
And based on Washington's recent sports history, by far the most predictable outcome would be that they win Game 4, come home, and everyone's all excited. They get out to an early lead, and then they blow it and lose in heartbreaking fashion.
Maybe
that would
19
follow.
innings.
That would follow
19
tradition.
or 20
Yeah,
innings.
19 or 20 innings.
Well, Neil, the Giants have talked about their experience and their knowing how to win and that psychological advantage. How much to that do you think is there? And the Nationals having known in their recent history heartbreak.
Right. I don't think it plays too much. I think Dan touched on it. They're not getting on base, and if they're not getting on base, they can't score any runs, and that's what we're seeing. Until they, start to be a little bit more disciplined at the plate, they're chasing a lot of pitches outside of the zone.
Yeah.
Now, in fairness to them, the strike zone has widened quite a bit in the playoffs. There's been some questionable calls in almost every series that we've seen, but they need to get on base, and if they can't do that, then they could very well find themselves closed out in Game 5.
Well, Dan, you mentioned the Washington recent sports history, and that kind of transitioned to the next question. If the Nationals aren't able to extend the series, it'll be another year where they're a team that had high expectations going into the season, and they flame out in the playoffs, much like the Washington Capitals have done year after year after year. Would it be too early to start comparing those franchises? It's not the first time it would have happened to the Nationals, and we know the Caps history in that, Neil, obviously. That's something in your wheelhouse. Is it fair to think about the Nationals in that regard yet?
No, not at all, because the Washington Nationals are actually built correctly, for lack of a better term. I mean, they have very deep pitching. They got superstars, up to bat. I mean, they're built the way that playoff teams are built. The Washington Capitals were built from the wings in, and in the National Hockey League, you need center depth, and you need very good center depth in order to win a Stanley Cup. So I think it's apples to oranges. I think it's because they both reside in D.C. and there's been a lot of heartbreak in D.C. come playoff time. But there's really not much to even compare the two.
Well, let me ask you this: is it fair to say the closer and the goalie have some of the same responsibilities in terms of that's the back end, that's the last line of defense? The Caps haven't had that, and the Nationals have it kind of in a shaky fashion. Is that fair to compare?
No, I would disagree with that. I think the Caps have had the goaltending.
Yeah.
Braden Holtby has been a very good goaltender, especially at even strength. I think that the penalty kill is what's caused the Capitals some problems.
Yeah.
There's really not a comparable in baseball. It's the closer. He's in there when there's very little room for error, and one pitch can very well change the game, and sometimes it does. And then we talk about that pitch versus everything else before that. So I really am not a fan of this Washington Capitals Nationals. They both stick in the playoffs
comparison
type narrative.
Yeah, and I mean, I obviously it's a totally different sport and
Yeah,
a totally
sure.
different team. But to me, the similarity would be if they lose again, it would be the first round thing. The fact that when the Capitals were so dominant a couple of years and then bowing out in the first round, that the Nats, if they do lose the series, it would be twice with the best record in the NL and home field advantage, losing in the first round. Just I think it really rips your heart out in a way. And obviously, it's not fun to go to the World Series and lose the World Series, but I think maybe there's a certain satisfaction in getting to at least enjoy weeks of thrills and weeks of national attention as opposed to just a quick little fart noise.
But would you say there's also more hope for the Nationals, even if they don't win the series, because they're built, like Neil was said, they're built the right way, and they're young, and they still have a long way to go, where the Caps, their star players are nearing the end of their career, or that's not the early part of their career.
They have a lot of important decisions coming up.
Yeah.
This is not going to be the Nationals team that you see. I mean, obviously there are elements of it, but I mean, I think that it's a little bit speculative to say, oh, these guys are going to be fine for 6 years. I think if you have the best record in the National League twice out of 3 years, you probably want to win a playoff series out of it.
Yeah, and you go back to the Caps. You don't have to go back too many years to think about the time when they were set up to win with the young guns.
2009,
Sure.
2010.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about a window and maybe multiple Stanley Cups and didn't even get to one. I think in comparing the Nationals' playoff failures to the Caps, for me, yeah, it's not the first time, but it'll only be the second time if they bow out this year. Whereas the Caps are 20.
That's something,
I've
right?
only broken your heart
Years.
twice versus
And
4
in terms
times.
of comparing the heartbreak, I think baseball maybe even more so than hockey because of the 162 games, and you figure, all right, we're the favorite. This is proven true, played out over 162 games, the best record in the National League. And then to go out in a 5-game series in the first round potentially is just, that's crushing.
Well, we're going to have a lot of time to revisit this in the future if the Nationals are still playing or if they're not. So let's move on to the other home team that played last night, the Washington Redskins. They lose to Seattle. They were close, but from my vantage point, the only reason this game was close at all was because Seattle had 13 penalties for 90 yards. They gave them an entire football field to work with the game, okay? Or else it would have been a 3-touchdown separation. But in any case, the Redskins go to 1-4, lose their third straight. The question is it too early to write them off in the division with the Cowboys and Eagles playing so well, and the Giants, who may be the best team in the division right now? Dan, what do you think?
It's close, man. It's getting close to time to write them off, and it's been 5 games, but they're 3 games back of 2 different teams, and the teams ahead of them are all going to be playing each other. So there's a bunch of wins that they're automatically going to get. I mean, this was, for months, we were always saying that the saving grace of this Redskins team and their playoff chances were that they were in one of the weakest divisions in the league. And as always, we didn't know what was going to happen in the NFL. Things change around. I mean, it's no guarantee that the Cowboys and the Eagles, who both have had their issues, are going to keep winning games at this pace. But they already have a combined, I mean, the other 3 teams in the NFC East have a combined 4 losses. The Redskins have 4 losses by themselves.
Right.
So it's getting close. I mean, you lose a couple more games here, and basically you are essentially eliminated before the halfway point of the season. So,
Are you ready to write them off yet, Scott?
Yeah, I think it's
That's pretty easy.
maybe before last week. I mean, they showed me something against Seattle. I did not expect it to be that close.
Yeah.
But it's like Dan said, it's looking less and less likely that 8-8 or 9-7 even is going to be good enough to compete in the NFC East. And I mean, the Redskins' schedule, it doesn't get a whole lot tougher.
At
I mean,
Arizona, that's
right. And haven't played well going on the West Coast. So you got San Francisco and Indianapolis down the line.
Yeah.
I
Monday
don't
nighter
see.
in Dallas.
Yeah.
I don't
Neil,
see him competing.
Your thoughts on where
Yeah,
the Redskins are still they're a viable team to contend?
No, they haven't been for some time. Even before coming into Seattle. I mean, this is a team that wasn't that good. I mean, they had some pieces in place, but they weren't good enough to contend in the East. And they have maybe 3 wins left on the roster. I mean, you have Tennessee, you have Tampa Bay, and possibly St. Louis. I mean,
Tampa Bay, they pushed New Orleans.
Yeah,
New Orleans,
so I mean, that's not even a gimme.
Yeah.
And it's the Redskins have the worst record in the worst division in the NFL, and their last 3 games are against division opponents. I just don't see them having enough wins to be competitive once those 3 games at the end of the schedule come around.
I totally agree with you in general, but I think that they will certainly win some random games that you don't expect them to win at this point looking forward. Like, they're going to beat.
I mean, how many games? They're probably not going to beat San Francisco and Indianapolis, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying. They're going to win a random game.
They have Dallas.
So they're going to beat Minnesota. They're going to beat someone else.
I told you who they're going to beat. They're going to beat Dallas in Week 17 if the Cowboys have to win their game to go to the playoffs. There are no moral victories. We know that, but can the Redskins take anything away from the fact that they played the Super Bowl champions tight, or is it kind of a misleading score given how many penalties Seattle had?
I mean, tight. They lost by 10.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
it wasn't like.
And Harvard had 3 touchdowns
That were
negated from penalties.
Yeah,
I mean,
as a
the
fantasy
takeaway,
guy, believe me, it was painful.
to me, the takeaway is how good Cousins and Deshaun Jackson look. I mean, they look like they've been playing a long time together, and they had some deep strikes, and that may even be the blueprint to beat Seattle going forward. Who knows? But I mean, that to me is the takeaway, and then that's also good news, bad news, right? The good news is that Kirk Cousins is playing well with the receivers that are on the roster. The bad news is, what does that mean for Robert Griffin III if and when he's healthy and comes back? I mean, because there was one play in particular that Cousins had that deep throw, and I put on Twitter that RG3 doesn't make that throw because he thinks to run first. He's already scrambling. He's going to run first, and then we don't even see that type of completion. So, I mean, that to me is at least the bright spot of the game, even though it was a loss.
Well, then let's spin it forward here. I need predictions from you guys for their next game against Arizona. What do you see happening, Dan?
I mean, I think it's so hard to tell what's going to predict what's going to happen with this game without knowing what's going on with the Cardinals quarterback situation, which has been in flux for weeks and weeks. I've made fun of Forsyth for years when every week he seems to predict that it's going to be decided at the last minute by a field goal. But I think this game is actually going to be decided in the last minute by a field goal. I don't know who's going to win, but someone's going to hit a go-ahead field goal inside of 2 minutes.
So you're not a believer in Arizona, even though they were 3-0 and their loss was to Denver this past weekend.
I mean, I just feel like 50% of the NFL is just kind of mediocre or whatever, just kind of average teams where you don't really know who's going to win in every. I mean, it's like that Carolina-Chicago game. Yeah. Chicago and Carolina are just 2 kind of average teams, and one of them went up by a lot, and the other one came back and won. I think Arizona's in that category.
Scott, what's going to happen in Arizona?
I'll go with the less hyped homecoming/revenge game for Andre Roberts.
Yeah.
2 touchdowns for him, one of them on special teams, and that's what makes it bold. That's what makes it bold.
So the Redskins' horrible special teams are going to have a miraculous turnaround in the desert.
They're going to make some mistakes on special teams. I mean, let's be honest here, but Andre Roberts' special teams touchdown.
Neil, what are your thoughts on
special teams gaffes that the Redskins have had in 5 weeks, and the number of different kinds of gaffes?
Well, last night I counted 5. They gave 2 punt returns of 20 yards. They failed on an onside kick. Were fooled on a field goal try. I mean, there was EJ Biggers was calling a hold,
and they had a failed pooch kick to start the game.
It's just wasn't it supposed to be better this year? Clearly, it's gotten worse. Anyway, Neil, what's going to happen in Arizona?
Arizona doesn't have any sort of pass rush of note, and Kirk Cousins has about a 99 passer rating when there's no pressure versus about 60 with pressure. I could see him throwing for 350 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Is there a danger that they came so close to, at least in their minds, of beating Seattle or had a chance, and now they have to go all the way out west and they're so far behind the division? Is there a chance that they're going to throw their hands up and say, I mean, why? What are we playing for?
I mean, I don't think that they're probably going to give up explicitly like that, but I did think that some of the reports, and there were multiple reports out of the locker room last night of players kind of joking around and smiling and seemingly in a really good mood after losing by 10 points on national television. Doesn't seem like a great look to me. So I don't I don't love to hear that personally.
Yeah, I mean, is there a danger of saying, let's just phone it in the rest of the way, Scott?
I think it's a little bit too early for that. I think, as Dan said, there are going to be games where the Redskins are huge underdogs and they push it to the limit or they even win. I think I could entirely see them going out to Arizona and getting a win. I don't think that the locker room has been completely lost just yet.
Not completely. After
No.
5 weeks.
Well, okay.
Let's hope not.
Well, again,
Optimism.
Yeah, we'll revisit this again, obviously, next week. But let's move on to the rest of the league, the national perspective on the NFL. A lot of big games come up this weekend in the division and out of the division. Neil, let's start with you. What game do you have your eye on particularly?
Giants, Philadelphia.
Yeah.
We were just talking about the NFC East.
Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the Giants are the best team in the division. I think Philadelphia, despite their record, are smoke and mirrors. I mean, their offense has really sputtered. LaShawn McCoy is MIA.
Mm-hmm.
The defense is scoring every which way that you possibly can score, along with special teams. And I like what the Giants are doing. I mean, Eli Manning's completing over 66% of his passage. They have Andre Williams now in the running game. He's got a power running game, breaks tackles, pretty good on the pass block, hasn't allowed any sacks or any sort of pressure on Eli when he's in there on the pass block. So I actually like the Giants over Philadelphia, and I think this is the game where the Giants take over the NFC East and don't look back.
Yeah, Andre Williams reminds you a lot of Brandon Jacobs or Rodney Hampton, some of those
That
backs
power
that just
running
ran
game,
over
yep.
people. That's the kind of Giants' MO.
North-south, yeah.
Scott, your game that you're keeping an eye on this weekend.
I'm going Panthers-Bengals.
Yeah.
Two teams coming off back-to-back humiliating losses on Sunday Night Football. The Bengals most recently to the Patriots to fall to 4-1. The Panthers 3-2 though, and despite that, I check your power rankings and that they're 27th.
That's one
in this
year.
guy's 27th in this guy's power
Yeah,
rankings.
they have
I
no
think-
running backs.
They don't, but you got Cam Newton.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I think
Who's looked good.
Yeah,
He has.
We
He has.
finally got off track.
This is a key game for the Panthers, though, because the schedule for them coming up is brutal. They go to Green Bay. After that, they host Seattle. New Orleans hasn't looked great.
No.
And then at Philadelphia. So I think if the Panthers, with that NFC South division kind of struggling a little bit, this is an opportunity to make a statement, show Neil Greenberg something, and move up in those power rankings. And for the Bengals, a chance to see, are they for real? A 4-0 team going into the Patriots game, and then they just got shellacked. I don't know what to make of the Bengals at this point. I think we'll have a better idea after Sunday.
Yeah, you losing the Patriots at home after their struggles, though. It's kind of, I guess I would give them a little asterisk by that, right? Because Tom Brady's
Sure.
and Gronk is starting to get healthy. But okay, Dan, your game that you're going to watch.
I chose what I believe would be the two most hateable teams in the NFC, playing each other, the Cowboys and the Seahawks. I mean, certainly the Seahawks have to be number one, and they just added to their reputation Monday night by talking all kinds of junk about the Redskins after the win, which is fine. They won. That's cool. And the Cowboys, the Jerry Jones, the Jerry World, all that. I think they're probably number 2 on the NFC hate list right now. So there are a couple of one-loss teams. The Seahawks we expected to be there. Cowboys we probably didn't. But I'm curious to see if the Cowboys can do better with the Seahawks than the Redskins did.
Well,
if they could
we know no one beat Seattle in Seattle, right?
Arizona did last year.
Yeah. Well, if Dallas goes in and wins, does that change your perspective completely about what they can be?
Probably it changes my perspective more about the Seahawks, who I already am kind of feeling a little bit wishy-washy on, honestly, after what they did in San Diego and even what they did last night. Sure, they had Harvin, penalties, blah, 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 but that's part of what they did. They committed penalties that got touchdowns called back. So I'm kind of, and I think they were one of the leaders in penalties last year, too.
Yeah, they were.
The Super Bowl. So I think it would be more a referendum on the Seahawks not really being all that great if they lose to the Cowboys.
I'm looking to see if Dallas can stop Russell Wilson. That kid moves.
He does. And, well, DeMarco Murray's had, 5 straight games of 100 yards. And if he can go into Seattle and rush for 100 yards, I think that does say, obviously it says something about Seattle, but it says something about Dallas, too. I mean, I don't know.
Trying to set you off.
It says something about Alfred Morris, too, if DeMarco Murray can go
for
Seattle.
Russell Wilson had like 100 yards more rushing than Alfred Morris history.
But fair to say that the Cowboys' offensive line much improved compared to the Skins' offensive line, where Morris is not getting a lot of space.
Yeah,
regardless.
the Redskins fans have wanted for years is to invest draft picks, high draft picks in the offensive line. Dallas has actually done that.
Yeah.
Even if it pains Jerry Jones.
Because he wanted Johnny. We all know he wanted Johnny Football.
But they have like 3 first-rounders starting
right.
on the offensive line. So.
And here's the payoff. So, okay. Well, hockey season starts Wednesday. The Caps open their season on Thursday against Montreal at home. New coach, new GM, finally. But so my question for you, Neil, is why should we expect this season to be any different than the past? They've had new coaches before. This is kind of, I don't know if you would say it's kind of the same roster, but the stars, the main guys are, I guess, still there. Why will this season be any different, or is it going to be the same old Caps that we've seen the last 10 years or so?
I think it's going to be different.
Okay.
I'm actually optimistic for this Capital season for the first time in a long time. And a large part of that is the defensive depth. They brought in Matt Niskanen and Brooks Orpik. And while I wasn't a fan of the Brooks Orpik signing, I do think he's going to help the penalty kill, which was a major problem for this team last year. And like you said, a lot of the same stars are still here, Alex Ovechkin, Nicholas Backstrom, but they're also 2 of the best players in the league. So if you're starting a team with those 2, you're headed in the right direction. The one guy I'm looking at to see how his season goes is Mike Green. I think that he's a guy that's on his last year of the contract. He can easily be a big part of this offense. He can also help defensively. I'm curious to see how close he gets back to those Norris finalist years he had just a couple seasons ago.
Scott, what's going to be different, if anything, about the Cap season?
Well, first, I mean, we sat here last week, and all three of us said that we thought the Caps would make the playoffs and maybe even win a round. And then seeing some of the predictions that have come out this week, I'm surprised at how many Sports Illustrated included.
50-50,
yeah, 50-50 about whether they even make it.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think SI has them finishing 10th in the East,
Yeah.
10th or 11th. But for me, the thing that's different, or what will make the difference, is the fact that they have a new coach, sure, but one who has NHL experience.
Mm-hmm.
You look back to the last three in Adam Oates, Dale Hunter, Bruce Boudreau, 1 for 3. One of them worked out. Boudreau obviously doing great things still in the league, but Hunter and Oates were kind of wild cards without that experience, whereas Barry Trotz, we've talked about his defensive system and the defensemen they've had, but he has a record, many years of NHL success in Nashville, which didn't have the firepower that Washington does.
And he's got gravitas. I think that's the other thing, too, where players seem to want to listen to him. I mean,
Yeah.
you always hear, oh, he's our coach or whatever, but you can tell that Trotz also has experience, but he has that gravitas, and I think it's going to make a difference in the on-the-ice product.
Well, Dan, you've seen a lot of Caps teams do the same thing year in, year out. Do you expect the same this year, or is it going to be different?
Well, I mean, I think in terms of what you would expect differently, the two things that they said, personnel on the defense that Neil was talking about, and the coach, I think those are the biggest things, obviously. But I think a third thing is probably expectations, because, like you said, there are virtually none right now, and like even locally, they're kind of flying completely beneath the radar.
Yeah.
Probably beneath the Wizards in terms of attention right now. And I think that probably that's a good thing, because now if they're the 7th seed, if they're the 6th seed, if they're higher than that, I think it's kind of considered cool and like a cool little like surprise and bonus. And so I think the fact that right now they're not operating under the burden of high expectations, and they're not operating under, hey, can they win a Stanley Cup this year? They're operating under, hey, can they get back into the postseason? I think those expectations and kind of a little bit less pressure on them is a different thing, and that might actually help them.
Well, in a lot of ways, this team goes as Ovechkin goes. Certainly, he's the face of the franchise. Is this time nearing an end, Neil? How close is he? Or does he still have some highly productive years left?
Well, he certainly has some highly productive years. I mean, he is in his prime, so we could see, possibly another high 40s, 50-goal season. But at some point, it has to taper off, and it's really going to depend on the power play, because that's where a good number of his goals come from. There's already been talk that he's not going to be out there for the entire 2 minutes of each power play. That will decrease some of his production. So I think on a per minute basis, his production will probably be pretty consistent, but we may see a drop in the numbers only because he's not going to be out there as long.
I was thinking the other day, this might be the last coach that he has in Washington.
Well, he could still kill another coach.
It just seems like if he actually did kill another coach, it would be time to be a little bit more serious about wondering.
This could be it. Either the Trotz-Ovechkin relation, could make or break his legacy. Even I think. I mean, if there does something does go wrong with Barry Trotz as the head coach, then you really do have to take a long, hard look of how this team is constructed and why it is they can't keep a coach long term. But I agree, this probably will be his last one.
We referenced Barry Trotz's defensive principles. The last time Ovechkin played for a coach that had defensive principles, we know that didn't work out great. What do you kind of expect that relationship to be like this year? Scott?
Yeah. I mean, he said all the right things so far. I think, Ovi's going to Ovi. He wants to shoot. He wants to score. But I think to maybe not have to do everything and to carry the team each and every night, I think ultimately he wants to win more than all of that. Right now, I have no reason to. Yeah,
Dale Hunter was like a stultifying, just kind of depressing style of hockey. I don't think that's what we associate with Trotz, even if he is more defensive oriented.
Yeah, and Trotz coaches to his personnel. I don't think he's necessarily a defensive coach. He was a coach that had a great defense and maximized that asset. I mean, so I would look for Ovechkin to be asked to play less defense, but he's also going to be asked to play less minutes. And I think that's where, if there's any sort of tension in his game or the relationship or anything like that, it's going to be he's not going to get as much ice time, at least it doesn't sound like he's going to, that he has in the past.
Okay, well, with hockey season here, NBA season's got to be right around the corner. They're playing some preseason games now. Usually you don't watch them, but last night the Wizards and Bulls got into it a little bit there. Joakim Noah and Paul Pierce, the veteran they added to kind of be a placeholder, ideally for Otto Porter when he gets the hang of it finally. Is this an indication of a rivalry that's could be brewing, down the road? Because these are two teams, presumably, if Derrick Rose stays healthy and the Wizards live with potential, that could meet in maybe the conference finals. Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
Or the semis,
yeah.
They're probably two of the
so
4 or 5 best teams.
Is this kind of preseason nonsense, or is there something to it?
No, I think there's something to it. I mean, I think that the Wizards have talked a lot about trying to be these new like bad boys or whatever, which is kind of bizarre. But like then in their first preseason game, there they are like mixing it up twice. And then there's like Seraphin like setting a pick and sitting over Jimmy Butler, and then Seraphin this morning tweeted out the YouTube video of him setting that pick and standing over Jimmy Butler. I mean, it's kind of silly, but certainly there's now with Cleveland and with Chicago, based on the war words with Cleveland and the guards last week, there's regular season Eastern Conference Wizards games that you're kind of looking forward to and wanting to tune into. So yeah, I mean, I think that these are, with the Cavs, the Bulls, and the Wizards, these are going to be 3 playoff teams, and they're going to have some problems, some regular season battles. It's going to be entertaining, which is cool because a lot of regular season NBA games aren't.
Scott, is a preseason skirmish of a sign of things to come or not?
I think so.
Yeah.
And I think even before that, let's say they just played a clean game last night. I think looking back to the first-round playoff series last year, just kind of the Bulls style, the skirmishes in that one, the suspension of Nene. I mean, I think we knew. This wasn't on my radar, the preseason game last night. I didn't think there would be people poking each other in the eye. And
you weren't the only. Yeah, you weren't the only one.
But I think certainly looking ahead to the regular season, anytime these teams go up, not only because you figure they'll be up there in the top of the Eastern Conference standings, but because of what happened, the history in the playoffs from last year. Yeah, I think this is a budding rivalry.
Do you see it that way too, Neil? Or is it just Paul Pierce being Paul Pierce and no joke him? No, everyone wants to take a stab at him, or is there something to it? And will it be a rivalry developing this season?
No, I think we saw a little bit of it in the playoffs last year,
yeah.
and I agree what both Dan and Scott said. I mean, we're looking at 2 of the teams that are more than likely going to contend for the Eastern Conference. And this is all. Paul Pierce also has been around the league a long time, been on championship caliber teams, and knows the league. And I think almost. He kind of looks at this as a way to get, I don't know, maybe a little spark going, but I like it.
I think so. I mean,
I like mixing it up.
Pierce has been really vocal already within the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, and that's what this team needs, I think, right now. I mean, we talked about the Cavs being an afterthought almost in the DC sports scene. I mean, I think this is going to push them even further on the fringe because the Wizards look like a fun team to watch, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they have the skill, and if they bring that element of being kind of a league badass type thing, I mean, I think that they're gonna get a lot of attention this year.
Guys, thank you so much. Great insight as usual. Thanks for making it easy for me. For Neil Greenberg, Scott Allen, and Dan Steinberg, thank you. I'm Gene Wang. Thanks again for watching Post Sports Live.